Bruised is the latest movie from Netflix, directed by Halle Berry, about a disgraced MMA fighter who finds redemption in the cage and the courage to face her demons when her son she had given up on as an infant unexpectedly re-enters her life. This film stars Halle Berry and it's actually Halle Berry's directorial debut. Of course, many actors down the years have transferred from being an actor to a director to varying degrees of success. This is a brand new Netflix movie and I've made no secret of the fact that I think Netflix don't make very good movies this year, especially in 2021 at least. This is a movie that wasn't even on my radar. I didn't even know it was being made until Netflix sent me the press screener for it. There has been plenty of movies about professional fighters that have been pretty damn good down the years. The Fighter, The Wrestler even, you could potentially put in that category. Here Comes the Boom with Kevin James. You know, there's been some good, there's been some bad. Warrior comes to mind actually when I think of MMA. Warrior is a fantastic movie. I was looking forward to this one. But what I'll tell you is that within the first 30 minutes of the movie, I was thinking to myself, this might be one of the worst movies I've ever watched. Now, it's important to state before I go into too much giving out about the movie is that the movie is pretty low budget for a Netflix movie. $11 million. Now, $11 million is still a lot of money, but in terms of movies, it's not exactly blockbuster level. It's well below the sort of budgets I think Halle Berry would even be used to working on that level of film. But it's 2021. There's a lot of very good filmmakers out there, a lot of good very indie filmmakers out there, a lot of good YouTubers who could probably get better visuals than this movie has. Because within the first 30 minutes of the movie looks terrible at times. Beyond terrible. Some of the shot selection, the lighting throughout the movie, especially in the first 30 minutes, is horrendous. Some of the visuals, some of the shot selections, it was just absolutely terrible. And as I mentioned, it's 2021, there's no excuse for that stuff, so you have to believe it was deliberate on the choice of the filmmakers and Halle Berry who's directing it. Now, at the same time, within the story, I fully understand why they might want it to look gritty and shaky and noisy, because they're trying to establish how messed up her character's life is. They're trying to show the rawness of her life, how difficult her life is, and throw that into the visuals, but they've kind of gone completely overboard with it and it just looks terrible to the point where I think the majority of the people who watch this movie will turn it off before the 30-minute mark. And it's kind of a shame because what I found with this movie, as I mentioned, first 30 minutes, absolutely awful. Not just because of the visuals, because some of the story elements, because some of the acting, some of the character points, they're just really bad in the first 30 minutes. The movie really trying to find its feet. And that first 30 minutes could definitely chop down to like 5 minutes while I tried to establish the character. Halle Berry's character is an MMA fighter who has had a bad fight. She jumped out of the cage. We'll get into that because, you know, there's reasons to talk about that. She jumped out of the cage during a fight, kind of got humiliated, went off and tried to get a normal job and live her life and kind of became an alcoholic. But she gets a chance at redemption, and right when her chance at redemption comes along comes a kid who is her kid that was left with the father, but the father died, so now the kid is her responsibility. So it kind of derails her plans. But the point when the kid comes in is when the story gets interesting. They start building a relationship between Halle Berry and the kid, despite the kid not talking. They throw in some other elements. And what I found from the 30-minute mark onwards, that the pace of the movie picked up, my intrigue in the movie picked up, and overall the film kept my attention much better after the 30-minute mark. This is a movie I was watching in between doing something else, and I had to do something in the middle of the movie, but I couldn't tear myself away from the screen because I wanted to keep watching the story at a certain point. And we'll get into some of the problems with the movie, but for the most part, again, as I keep saying, after the 30-minute mark, because that first 30 minutes is pretty damn bad, after the 30-minute mark, the movie does pick up dramatically. When I was watching the first 30 minutes of the movie, I was saying to myself, this might be one of the worst movies ever. This is definitely getting a 1 out of 10 in my review. My opinion did change as the movie wore on. Now, I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I will try to put up spoiler alerts where necessary. So let's start talking about some of the story, because let's start off at the very beginning of the movie where we get some terrible point of view footage from Halle Berry's character. She's in a cage, in an MMA fight, she's getting beaten, and from what we can see, she can barely see, she's getting beaten up, about to pass out from the visuals we see, so she jumps out of the cage. Now surely, if a fighter was that bad where they can't see, they're getting beaten, they're getting hit against the cage, they're going down, the referee would just step in and stop the fight. Unless you got a bad referee. But no, somehow Halle Berry still has the strength to jump out of the cage, which is kind of stupid right from the bat. Then another problem I spotted pretty quickly with the movie is that I get that they're trying to fit a lot into the character. They're trying to fit a lot of character points into the movie, but it really just seemed at points they're trying to tick boxes, trying to get as much stuff about the character into the movie as possible, give the character every possible problem. By which I mean, and there probably will be spoiler alerts here, so if you haven't seen the movie, go check it out on Netflix, come back, then let me know your opinions in the comment section below. So to point out what I mean by ticking boxes, first of all, we've got a disgraced MMA fighter or a humiliated MMA fighter. So they turn to alcohol. They're an alcoholic, tick the box. They've got a job that they don't like, tick the box. She goes home to her boyfriend, they've clearly got a toxic relationship, tick the box. Then she's got an estranged kid, so, you know, another box ticking. Her boyfriend becomes abusive, another box to tick. Her mother was neglectful, so another box to tick. Then you find out that her mother just turned a blind eye to sexual abuse, so sexual abuse when the character was younger, another box ticked. Later on in the movie, we find out that her father gave her the name Pretty Bull the last time she saw him. Estranged father, dead father at an early age, another box ticked. And you get my point at this stage. They're just ticking boxes of what the character should have. They're trying to put as much into this one character as possible to the point where they put a little bit too much in. And it just seems like they're adding things onto the character for the sake of it. In fact, at times, things just pop up about the character, like about her father giving her the nickname, that pops up so late in the movie, and we find out so late in the movie after we found out everything else about her troubled past, that the stuff about her father dying or disappearing when she was younger, that's just randomly thrown in at some point to add to the character's poor childhood. It just did seem at times in this movie they were trying too hard to just add so much generic stuff that we've seen in so many movies onto one character. Now, some people do have lives where just everything goes wrong for them. And that definitely seems what her character is. But for the most part, with characters like this, they've 2, maybe 3 problems. This character has about 20 different problems and 20 different motivations for becoming the person she becomes. I really think it was a case of trying too much, and they could have simplified the character a little bit, in my opinion. But what I will say, trying to get some good points, is that I do think the relationship Halle Berry builds with the kid is better done than a lot of movies have done it. The story does get a lot better after the 30-minute mark. It has its flaws, it becomes a little bit generic. I'm not going to talk too much about the end fight because that's a definite spoiler. There'll be no reason for you to watch the movie if you haven't watched it. What I will say is that the character she's built up to for this big money fight is only ever addressed as Lady Killer. And that's the only thing we ever find out about her up until the fight, is that she's called the Lady Killer. They kind of didn't do a great job of establishing the obstacle Halle Berry had ahead of her. So definitely one element they could have improved on, although it's very clear that the focus of this movie isn't on the fight in the ring, it's more on the fight outside the ring. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the actual fight, but I won't talk about the ending of the fight. There was a couple of points that are pretty stupid within the fight from a fight perspective. No, I'm not an MMA expert. I do watch from time to time, but I definitely wouldn't be an expert. But what I would say is this fight, they're trying to make it interesting for a screen, but there's 4 or 5, maybe even 6 rounds in a row where Halle Berry and the Lady Killer are on the ground grappling, and it's counter after counter after counter, submission after submission after submission, different mount after different mount after different mount, and there's no breaks, there's no one sitting on top of each other. They just constantly go. Apparently they have the greatest stamina in the history of sport, because no fighters in the world go 5 rounds non-stop grappling, non-stop counter after counter after counter. There's always someone holds someone in one position, or holds a submission for a moment, or someone just leans on someone to drain their energy. It's never non-stop grappling for 5 or 6 rounds. So a little bit of suspension of disbelief is needed there. Then there's also, at the end of one of the rounds, Halle Berry has her opponent in a rear naked choke. She's choking the life out of her, only for her opponent to be saved by the bell. Saved by the bell! And Halle Berry immediately lets go of the choke. Most fighters do hold on a little bit because, you know, dirty tactics. But she lets her go. Her opponent just walks away like it was nothing and looks back at her as if to go, oh, you almost beat me. She's almost had the life choked out of her. She's almost passed out from being choked. And then she just walks away like it's nothing. Completely no-selling the choke. If that was WWE or something, or wrestling, that would make a bit more sense, but for an MMA fight, it was kind of a fuck up on the filmmaker's parts. Minor as it will be, because a lot of people wouldn't even notice it, especially if you're not an MMA fan. The fight itself at the end is interesting. There's only so much you can do with an end fight. You know, we've seen so many of them before. Either your protagonist wins or your protagonist loses. They're your 2 options. You could do a draw, but who wants to see a draw? What I will say is, if you've seen many fight films, especially one of the most famous fight movies, you'll definitely know the ending to the fight. I assume that's where they took inspiration from, was a certain fight movie starring Sylvester Stallone. Now, Now, I feel like I've just been bitching about this movie all the way through. As I said, there is some terrible points in it. Some of the cinematography within the movie is terrible. Some of the lighting in the movie, to the point where you can't see characters' facial features at times, is horrendous. The acting, for the most part, was okay. Halle Berry does pretty well in her role. At times, she's a bit meh, but she's pretty good in the movie. I think the star of the show is the kid, who ironically doesn't even have any lines, but the kid is really good within the movie, and I think elevates the movie a lot when he comes into it, and at times even carries the movie despite not doing too much himself. But for me, my attention was definitely on the kid of, you know, this poor kid. He's gone through so much, and hopefully he's going to be okay and survive despite all this turmoil around him. It wasn't so much on Halle Berry and whether she wins her fight or not, because I didn't really care too much about her character. But overall, when it came down to it, when the credits rolled, and I asked myself, did I enjoy the movie? The answer was yes. I did enjoy the movie when I stuck with it. And that's the thing with this movie, you stick with it, give it 30-40 minutes, get through that part and forgive all the shit in that part. The movie gets a lot better. As I mentioned at the beginning, if they cut out that first 30 minutes, I think the rating for this movie would be much higher. But for me, when it comes down to a rating, out of 10, weighted against the other movies I watched recently, I'm gonna give this movie a 6 out of 10. It's not amazing. It's a good movie, not a spectacular movie, not a completely awful movie, although I'll fully understand if a lot of people didn't enjoy this one and turn it off very quickly. For a directorial debut on a low budget, it's not a terrible effort from Halle Berry, but I'd expect more from an actress who's been in Hollywood for so long and achieved so much in Hollywood. But at the same time, I'm intrigued to see what Halle Berry does next. By standards of Netflix movies, I enjoyed this one a lot more than other Netflix movies this year. But this is where I throw it over to you guys. Bruised has just come out today, so you might not have even seen it yet. But if you've seen it, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know all about it in the comment section below. And with all that being said and done, thank you so much for watching.